the Bruins are obviously, a borderline playoff team. It doesn't look like, a whole lot's happening this year. And to be fair to the organization, this has been a very, very long stretch of success, at least regular season success. And if you look at a lot of other franchises, they've had huge peaks and valleys. They've had just valleys. I mean, you don't want to become like a Chicago. You don't want something like that happening. The Neely mentioned it. You've talked about it. Two paths. Now, for years, they've gone to improve the team in the now at the trade deadline. Fluto, what do you think they should and what do you think they will do come the trade deadline?
Well, it would be foolish in terms of trying to improve this year's team just because, like, what is this, 48 games now? That's a healthy sample size to determine what you are. And what you are is, okay, maybe you sneak in to the playoffs because it's going to be a dogfight either way. Every point, every game will matter. But even if you do get in, realistically, are you going to be playing into June? No, you're just not because there's too many levels of underperformance on the roster that are not going to get you into June based on what you have. What you have are three legitimate foundational players in terms of David Pastrňák, Jeremy Swayman, and when he's healthy, Charlie McAvoy. And a lot of teams would like to have those players at those positions as their foundation. But around that, like you start with what they thought would be a number one center, and he's playing number three center yesterday against a team in a complete rebuild, San Jose and Elias Lindholm. You can start right there, and that's a glaring red light issue. To be looking at this as a cup contender, it's just not reality. So it's very clear. And yes, 8 straight years into the playoffs, and uh, again, those three foundational players. But to be reinforcing this year's team, not going to happen. You have to rebuild for the future.
Okay, so at the beginning of the year, Fred talked about how defensively and just the way the team was built, it could be a team that does not have the same regular season success, but could be built for the playoffs in terms of their size.
Yep.
We've seen the defense struggle enough now, and I'm not picking on Fred by asking you this, Fluto, but is there anything wrong with I guess that blueprint, or what went wrong in terms of the way the team was constructed? Because I believe he was right. They were thinking about building it that way. What did not come to fruition where this team is good enough in the regular season to make the playoffs, but they just can't? They don't have that playoff thing about them, either in the physicality or the defense, that will make them a contender to make a deep run.
Well, it's just too risky the way that they play. Like, look at those, especially if you really focus in on that three game segment. Florida, Tampa Bay, and the third game is escaping me, but clearly outshot and just so many chances in the defensive zone that they were allowing, and grade A chances right in the middle, right in front of Jeremy. It's just the guy, he can't stop everything, even though he looks like he's really locked in and being that ace again. Just the puck movement is not good enough. The retrievals, I think you have to look at defensively, you have to look at the foot speed in terms of getting to those pucks in the defensive zone and then being sharp enough to move it out quickly and then get going the other way. And of course, that's an issue for the forwards too, that they have to be better at coming back and being available, helping out your Ds, especially your centers. And again, that's an issue that I think people thought would be a liability in terms of not being strong enough up the middle, but it's really been an issue now that you're not getting what you thought you would get in Lindholm. And then Coyle is playing right wing now too. So the center position has to be addressed. That's a hard ask, especially at the deadline. That's more of a July 1 issue. And then the defense, Yeah, it has to be quicker. It has to be sharper. It has to be cleaner. Okay, yeah, there absolutely that was the thinking going into the playoffs. Big, strong, physical, tough, and you certainly have that in Zadorov, Carlo, and McAvoy. Who knows how long he's been injured because he hasn't been McAvoy like we've seen for a long time. So who knows how long he's been dealing with that issue because he just hasn't been himself. And you're picking him to be number one, and it hasn't been good enough.
Fluto, I'm wondering what you think about the leadership of this team. Brad Marchand got into it with one head coach on the bench, and then he got benched by his replacement over the weekend for overtime against Ottawa. He hasn't been himself either. I think he's a minus, a plus minus. I think he's a minus for the season. I can't remember a captain that was a minus for a season. I'm wondering what you think about his captaincy for this team.
I think it's been all right. I think that's just a natural byproduct of the team not being where it traditionally is. I think he's been fine. I think the issue will be because I think you have to consider it. Okay, is this a tradable captain in terms of trying to accelerate this retool? Um, if you trade Brad, can you get back a high-end future, a first-round pick, a prospect, perhaps? But would they consider it? Considering what that would do in terms of the leadership around him. Like, is Pastrňák ready to be the captain? Is McAvoy ready to be the captain at this point? Probably not. That's a big ask.
Yeah.
So that's really that's a tough one for management to really answer, and maybe they don't have to answer it until they get closer to the trade deadline to have an even sharper picture of what they will be and what Brad will be in the next 2 or 3 years. But in terms of just focusing on his leadership, no issues there.
Okay. I was out of town. Do we know why Brad didn't play in that overtime?
Go ahead, Fluto.
Yeah, go ahead. I just in case anyone is as stupid as me and doesn't know.
Yeah, coaching decision, and to be as loose as Brad was at the end of the third period in regulation with the goalie pulled, and then to see Ottawa score two there, it wasn't good enough. He was having a tough game. There were a bunch of players that were having tough games, especially in the third period. So it happens. He wasn't happy about it. Coach wasn't happy about it. They deal with it. They talk about it. They move on. So it happens, right? We saw Pastrňák get benched for an entire period earlier this season, and he's your best player.
But it's different if it's a captain. It just is. It's different.
Well,
go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, it could set the tone for the rest of the guys, saying, okay, if the coach is going to do this to the captain, the only guy that's won a championship, well, this could happen to me if I don't shape up and clean up in the defensive zone. So that's that. I'm sure Joe was partly thinking about that too. Like, you got to hold everybody accountable, including the captain.
Okay, so let's all agree that. And by the way, when I thought that if they were going to have success in the playoffs because they built the team this way, or that's what they were going for, I assumed they'd make the playoffs. Things have turned. So what did I know about Elias Lindholm? But now I know he's not good.
Well, he wasn't good last year, and they gave him a lot of money.
So anyway, when we look at this, Fluto, who do you see having value? You talk about the cornerstones of the organization that they're not going to move. You mentioned 3 guys that they won't move. Beyond that, who holds value, do you think, that they could get something actually worthwhile for?
Oh, you look at the pending unrestricted guys. That's Marchand and Frederick. The latter, it really looks like that's going to be in play in terms of Trent. Obviously, no traction in terms of negotiation, and if you're if you're a Tampa or like, how good would he look in Florida on a third line, just kicking everybody's butt like the rest of that team? Like, there'd be a line out the door in terms of teams that would want him as a third line complementary player, with a possibility to re-sign. So if you can get a second round pick, first round, I don't know about first round pick if he's going to get you that, but that's currency. The Marchand issue, they have to look at that. Beyond that, in terms of players with term, you look at Charlie Coyle. That's kind of a second line, third line player that teams would like. Center, right wing, PK, face off. Yeah, that's attractive. Brandon Carlo, Pavel Zacha, Morgan Geekie. But Geekie looks like he's sticking in terms of he's playing out of position, left side. But that's your one line right now, him, Zacha, and Pastrňák, that the coach can depend upon to give you something credible offensively on every shift. So, and he's still young. He's restricted after this year. So that looks like there's some value there in terms of retention. So players with term, Carlo, Zacha, Coyle. Those are your three.
Awesome. All right, Fluto, great information as always. Read them in The Athletic. We always appreciate the time. If you like that clip, check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. For more Bruins analysis and opinion, hit this playlist.